All right, so we got some big news to talk about today. One of these stories I haven't heard discussed anywhere. This information just came out today, and this is the kind of information that is quite disconcerting and makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck, especially if you're a prepper. So we got to talk about that. There's numerous other data points to go over today. Chief among them are the potential for civil unrest, the activation of sleeper cells. If things pop off in the Middle East, we may have seen one of those sleeper cells suppressed today, but the jury is still out on that. We also have an email to share with you from an individual who apparently got their marching orders today. So they actually forwarded the email from their captain. I'm not going to give away the country or any identifying information, but I can tell you it is quite telling and it corroborates well with what we are seeing currently in the Middle East. We have some major Russian hacks. We have the Russians and the Chinese unanimously aligning themselves with the Palestinian cause in terms of a couple statements that have been made today. A war in Yemen is starting once again. And it appears as though that there was some suspicious things going on 2 months in the run-up to the conflict. Ben Shapiro is arming himself with firearms, and our guest that we just had on, Joel Skousen, had some very interesting things to say, and I want to summarize that as well today and talk about how it maps on to what I'm seeing. Now, guys, it's very important that we don't get tunnel vision when we're analyzing the different theaters of war that are popping up everywhere, because it seems right when we get hyper fixated on one area of the map, all of a sudden something catches us off guard over here. So it's very important to keep your eyes on the periphery. Now, Kim Jong-un has ordered food reserves restored at all costs. North Korea released much of its rice reserves to keep people from starving during the pandemic. And now he's ordered the country's civil defense department and the military to prioritize the replenishment of military food reserves at all costs by the end of November. This is what sources told Radio Free Asia, which is a fairly credible news source, okay? Usually the allotment of military provisions and other rations is determined at the end of December, once the autumn grain harvest has completely dried. But the deadline has been brought forward by a month, according to a source in the Ryanggang province. Hope I said that right. Yangang? I was thinking Andrew Yang, but yeah, Ryanggang. Some experts said the move was simply to restore reserves depleted over the past couple years because of the pandemic lockdown. This seems like a routine order to restore those wartime stockage levels now that trade with China has restarted, a former U.S. defense official who served in South Korea said. But others think that it could indicate that Kim is preparing for military provocations in the coming months with the United States and South Korea. Now, before I read this any further, it's important to note that just today, the U.S. and South Korea started yet again another military drill with F-35s, nuclear submarines, nuclear-capable F-35s, okay, that are all going to be upgraded to work with these B-61, B-61-7 nuclear bombs, and we'll talk about the false media narrative surrounding that and why it's not as big of a deal as a lot of people think, but it kind of is at the same time. Basically, they're forward deploying all the F-35s in the numerous theaters in Europe, in Asia, in the Middle East, everywhere on the map. They're sending out these F-35s, which are effectively going to be tactical nuclear deployment systems. Anyways, so right now as we speak, they are doing these military exercises. We haven't seen tensions riding so high, I think, in North-South Korea since the Korean War, okay? And Kim Jong-un hasn't even done another nuclear test yet. He's done a lot of ballistic missile tests. If you go over all the news data points through the year and you put them and you condense them, you'll see how much activity has been happening there in terms of U.S.-South Korean exercise. Anyways, that's just something important to note, that while they say this, okay, that we have about a month, according to Kim Jong-un, by the end of November to get those stockpiles tip-top. What does he know that we don't? Remember, North Korea, Moscow, China, Iran, they're all working together. Those are the big four. There's a lot of like auxiliary nations that are also allied with them, but they all know the plan, okay? And there is most definitely a plan. Now, each corps of the People's Army keeps a year's worth of food. Did I read this last part? But others said it could indicate that Kim is preparing for military provocations in the coming months against the United States and South Korea. Each corps in the People's Army keeps a year's worth of food for soldiers in case of war, and another 1 month's worth of food in case supplies are cut off during wartime. There is also rice that is stored for industrial use, and another 3-month wartime allotment for civilians. Wartime reserve food is largely divided between the national leaders' share and the share that is stockpiled by the General Reserve Services Bureau for soldiers in case of war. Kim's instructions were just recently delivered at a lecture on October 21st. The instructions were as follows: to completely maintain the equipment and materiel of the regular army and civil defense forces, he said. They will be maintained so that they can be mobilized at any time, and to fill the wartime food reserve as a top priority. As a top priority. Now understand that right now, the whole purpose of this new deployment of new tactical nuclear bombs that are already being rolled out and likely already readily available to these F-35 systems, the purpose is going to be for bunker busting, okay? They're trying to fine-tune these, so it's very likely that these are going to be not airburst, but ground-burst tuned tactical nuclear weapons so that they can penetrate deep into the bunkers, because everything the North Koreans, the Chinese, the Iranians, and the Russians have, the most important elements of their strategic arsenal are underground. So the North Koreans and the Chinese have been building vast underground networks for this potentiality. Remember the other day when I said that while we sit here and play video games and tweet things, they are spending every waking moment preparing for what they inevitably know will be a clash with the superpower, which is lurking just outside their borders. Imagine that you are one of these countries and you're surrounded either by the U.S. Navy or the U.S. military, and you're constantly seeing reconnaissance planes skim your international airways and boundaries and waterways, and you're constantly seeing their warplanes brush up against your border. What do you think you're going to be doing 24/7? You are going to be acting like you're preparing for an existential crisis all the time, digging and a digging and a digging. That's why they know the only way they can beat these countries is if they retrofit these F-35s with tactical nuclear weapon systems that can penetrate into bunkers, and we don't even know if they can at this point. Let me just say this first, okay? Because there's a story floating around. The U.S. is building bombs that are 24 times the size of Hiroshima. They had bombs. They've detonated bombs, I think, that are, the Tsar bomb was like thousands of times more explosive than the Hiroshima bomb. Even the tactical dial-yield nukes that the U.S. has right now are beyond the amount of kilotonnage that some of these bombs are going to be, the new variant that's being released. So it's really not that much of a big deal. The only thing is that it's an upgrade. There's probably some new guidance systems in there. Maybe it's a bit more maneuverable. Maybe it's been more tuned for a ground burst. Maybe it's got better EMP effects. Well, maybe not if it's a ground burst. But anyways, I don't know. Nobody knows all the details. All we know is that they're upgrading one of their tactical nukes, and the media is running with it like, 24 times the size of the Hiroshima bomb. Well, we've had that for, 70 years. So that's not a big deal at all. Anyways, the instructions were to completely maintain the equipment and material of the regular army. Okay, I already read this, making food the top priority. And people had expected that the government food rations would be normalized in 2024 due to a good harvest this year, according to a source from Changgang province. And remember, the North Koreans now have a blank check for food from the Russians. The Russians have as much grain as the North Koreans are ever going to need. I guarantee you at their next military parade, they're going to be looking nice and plump. They're not going to be looking skinny like they were back in 2017. They're going to be marching maybe just a little bit slower. Bad joke. But now, if all the wartime food reserves have to be refilled, the residents won't have enough food to eat, she said. The country hasn't saved any food reserves for wartime in recent years. We often hear news that warehouse number 2, which stores city and country wartime food reserves, is empty, she said. Food reserve warehouses, and I don't necessarily believe this because Russia's got lots of food. They had a bumper crop this year. They're not going to let North Korea starve if North Korea is sending them artillery shells. So, take this with a grain of salt. But I do believe this article when they do say that this deadline has been imposed on this strategic wheat reserve or grain reserve. The United States Department of Agriculture predicted on August 28th that North Korea's rice production would be about 2.1 million tons, similar to 2022. Okay. And again, they're doing this South Korean U.S. military exercise concurrent with all of this happen. So, as you might have seen in the video we released earlier today, it was an hour long, so I'm not sure how many people were able to make it all the way through, but I would encourage you to, because even if you don't agree with everything Joel Skousen says, and I don't agree with everything the guy says, he makes some very, very compelling arguments, and he goes into great detail about all these things, and as much detail as our hour would allow. And he thinks that the Middle East situation is going to pop off within a month. Okay, I'm hearing people say that it's only going to be a couple weeks before things get really, really ugly in the Middle East, and they absolutely have a plan. Okay, and the only thing I'm suspicious of is why oil hasn't popped yet, and I think it's because Wall Street, as much as there might be a lot of insider trading that goes on, I think that they are quite myopic in their predictions, and they always get the long plays wrong. Typically, anyways, they get the long plays wrong. So I'm guessing that oil is going to spike. Perhaps there is a mitigating factor with the Saudis' ability to potentially pump more oil if they're still at the behest of the U.S., which apparently they are because they're allowing them to put missile defense systems within their country. And now there's a war brewing with Yemen, so they're probably going to need the U.S. support even more. So U.S. has that leverage, okay? And that's what this is all about, creating conflict. Now, one of the other things that Joel said in that video was that he thinks that the reason why we still have troops in these countries illegally occupying certain oil fields in Syria, in Iraq, is so that they can be sitting ducks, so that they can be bait that once this thing, as it is flaring up right now with Israel, and you're seeing the pogroms around the world, you're seeing, the flare-up, the biggest protest we've seen in some time. You're seeing violent riots in the streets, and that's only going to continue, but you're also going to see the emergence of these sleeper cells wake up when all of this whole plan becomes activated. And I think it could all fall apart at the same time in the sense that we're going to see cyber attacks, we're going to see sleeper cells in the forms of attacks on critical infrastructure, we're going to see people who are commissioned for self-deletion, if you will. Don't want to say the S word on here, but I think you get the point. People who are going to go and rage out and make sure they take themselves out in the process. We're going to see a lot of that because there are a lot of brainwashed, fanatical people out there. And this is going to beget a disproportional response from likely militia groups or whoever the case, and then that's going to turn into a problem eventually, as things always typically do, because fanaticism feeds on fanaticism. So you're going to have religious extremism feeding on nationalism and populism, and just this tribalistic, intense battle is going to ensue. Anyways, he's saying that in a month that's going to happen, but that how it's going to start is that the United States soldiers that are currently there, and there's not many, there's around 30,000, which is a sizable amount of soldiers, but that's peppered out through the entire Middle East, that once they are attacked in sufficient numbers, that it is going to warrant the U.S., who now has the largest amassing of warships, if you take NATO warships included in that, and whatever submarines are below the surface, if you take all of those carrier groups into consideration, they're going to have all the playing pieces in position to say, okay, now we have to declare war on somebody. Who's it going to be? Yemen, Iraq, Syria, Iran, possibly, who knows? But it maps on perfectly to this North Korea stuff, as if North Korea knows, and North Korea supports Palestine. North Korea supports Iran. In fact, there's a report that says that 10% of the weapons that are being used by Hamas come from North Korea. So this is, the lines between East and West have become abundantly clear in the past 18 months. There is no denying who's on what side, especially when you have China coming out today and saying, okay, we're removing the country of Israel from the map of Alibaba and Baidu. You have Putin coming out and making a very aggressive condemnation of the way that Israel and the United States are conducting themselves in the Gaza Strip right now. And I haven't seen them that mad since the declaration of the SMO. Not that I necessarily think these people are humanitarians who actually care. We know that they're willing to take immense amounts of human losses. That's just proven by history. I'm talking about the Russians and the Chinese. In any authoritarian societies, one thing they do have at their disposal is manpower. Okay, but anyways, I want to read this mobilization order. Now, I questioned this individual about this, and I said, this kind of sounds a little verbose and pretentious. It sounds as though maybe this was written by ChatGPT-4 or something. So just take it with a grain of salt, but understand that this maps on 110% to what we are seeing right now. Okay, that numerous countries are deploying to this region that he's going to mention in here. And I'm not going to mention any names. I'm not going to mention the country of origin. But when I did ask him, why does it sound so pretentious? He said, well, that's just how the captain is around here. Okay, I guess he's like a failed literary scholar or writer or something like that. He says, I trust this message to dear all SNCOs and officers. I trust this message finds you in good health. Even as the intelligence I'm about to convey weighs heavily upon my heart, allow me to stress with utmost seriousness that I cannot read today. I'm sorry, guys. We're going to straighten this out from here on in, okay? That the contents of this mission are of the most sensitive nature, and I implore each of you to regard them as classified, divulging it to no one. So, well, I guess we're kind of divulging it a little bit. But the reality is, like I say, this is all open source intel at this point, and I'm not going to give away anything that is specific or will compromise anybody's national security, if this is even true. Okay, I'm taking everything with a grain of salt. We're living in the age of deepfakes and AI. Indeed, it has come to your notice that our world is currently entangled in a series of unprecedented and disquieting events within the Middle East. The situation has reached a level where the very fabric of security and regional stability is gravely imperiled. Like that statement, that's like written by not a linguist, but like a novelist or something. Throughout my 3 decades of service to the such and such Air Force, I can scarcely recall a period in which my concern for the state of the world was more profound. Yeah, I don't know about this. I mean, why would you present this to your soldiers in this way? We're going to keep our critical thinking hats on for this one. Regardless, in response to these critical deployments, our number one wing of our military, I don't want to give away details, has embarked upon a rapid deployment to strategically vital base in Cyprus, which is true. We got the Germans deploying to Cyprus. We got all NATO deploying to Cyprus right now. Cyprus is the island that's kind of outside of Lebanon, between Greece and the Turks and the Aegean Islands and all those things, okay? Go look it up on a map. The expeditious mobilization of our forces is an indispensable measure to safeguard our national interests and to ensure the welfare of our allies in that fragile region. I don't know how this would pertain to this specific country's national interests or anybody's national interests, except for that they want to get that oil flowing. That's the only thing I can see. That's the only reason why they care about the Middle East at all. Look at how fast they moved to send $14 billion to Israel. It took months to get the equivalent to Ukraine. In response to these critical developments, blah, 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 I must underscore the utmost urgency of the situation, wherein your roles within this operation hold a significance of paramount magnitude. I don't know. Like you say, maybe it's just a pretentious caption. Failed writing student. Within the coming 24 hours, we shall furnish you with your mobilization orders replete with precise directives and comprehensive particulars relevant to your deployment. It is my foremost fervent aspiration that the governments embroiled in this crisis can, through diplomatic channels, secure a peaceful resolution. May the specter of military intervention be averted. During these tumultuous junctures, I retain faith in the potency of diplomacy and ardently, why don't they just say, get your ass in the damn plane and get to Cyprus. Just take your damn orders. You're the frickin' captain, man. You don't have to provide this kind of rationale. Shit rolls downhill. In conclusion, permit me to convey my profound gratitude for your unwavering dedication and unwavering commitment to our distinguished service. The blankety blank Air Force, indeed, has been graced by the presence of exceptional individuals such as yourself, blah, 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 and your valor will shine on brilliantly. Godspeed. Let us collectively beseech for a swift and harmonious resolution of these trying circumstances. Our thoughts and aspirations are irrevocably intertwined. I feel like the guy in the Matrix, the old guy, who's using words like irrevocably, intertwined with each of you as you embark upon this pivotal mission. Yours sincerely, guy I can't name, from country and division of the military I can't name. All right, well, whatever. We know that there's troops going to Cyprus, man. The shit's getting real. I got a message from a person who I respect greatly for their knowledge of what's going on in the world, and they have some grave concerns about the prospect of civil unrest ensuing in the form of, just everybody on edge right now with respect to the potential for these sleeper cells to be activated. Now, what is a sleeper cell? It is basically just an agent. It is a person who is incognito, a soldier, somebody who might have illegally crossed the border, the Muhammad Atta types, who are just awaiting orders to carry out a mission. And just like there is latent malware that exists on computers and backdoors into numerous programs that are waiting to be activated for a massive cyber attack that is likely going to accompany or precede World War III, there's also these people who are waiting to be activated and turned on throughout our society. And I would not be surprised if it all just started to happen at once. Because if you were trying to perpetuate something like that, you know that emergency services would be overwhelmed. So you might have a situation where you have one bad thing happen in a city, and then all of the police are consumed by that one event. And then all of a sudden, something else happens on that same day. This is kind of what happened on 9/11, where you had, just multiple hits at once. And in spite of the fact that the level of alert and vigilance escalates, there's still the fact that most of your resources are preoccupied tending to one of the emergencies as they arise. So when everybody's looking the other way, that's when you can expect that everything could flare up at one time. I would not be surprised that we haven't seen like the mother of all 9/11s, but in the form of some kind of active shooter thing taking place across the map, synchronized, with like 50 to 100 different shooters across the map. Now, this is just a prediction, okay? So if this comes true, I knew nothing, CIA, but it's not hard to speculate about these things when you have that open flow in the southern border. Now, I don't do a lot of politicking on this channel, but one thing is for sure, the border down there is really not secure. And it might not even take the form of active shooters. It could take the form of other self-deletion, mechanisms via incendiary or explosive devices. It could take the form of damaging critical infrastructure. As we know, it only would take the destruction of a handful of transformers across the United States to completely collapse the power grid. We've done videos on that in the past. In fact, I want to do a dedicated video on that very subject because most people don't realize that I think the number that they found was if you were to take out 9 and to err on the side of being conservative, I'll say 20 of the biggest transformers or the most critical ones in the most critical junctions of the grid, you could actually take down the majority of the power grid, okay, for hundreds of millions of people in North America. So these are things that we would see, and the reason why we would see them is because they know that this would preoccupy us back home, but unfortunately what that would likely ultimately do is backfire, because then the US war machine has everything it needs, a blank check, to go to full-out war in the Middle East, just like what happened in Iraq. But regardless, people who I respect are very concerned at this point in time. In fact, Ben Shapiro is apparently a big 2A guy now. I mean, of course, a lot of these grifters are, they'll cater to their audience. These are the same guys who were, anti-woke, intellectual, dark web, don't play the victim, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Now, all I hear all day is victim, 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 victim. And which is not to say to, downplay the potential for bad things happening to certain groups of people in the current climate. But I mean, at the same time, it starts to get a little old at some point where you gotta go out and get armed. You gotta take care of yourself, right? So regardless, Ben Shapiro is saying that many people of the Jewish faith, ethnicity, whatever you want to call it, because there's different ways to look at that, are getting themselves armed. And, I think that's great. I think that everybody should be, exercising their constitutional rights, if you have them in the United States, or your charter of privileges as we have here in Canada. Absolutely do that. I mean, you absolutely should do that. It should go without saying. So, if he did one good thing, in my opinion, it's that. Now, we got a war because apparently in Yemen, 4 Saudi soldiers were killed in clashes with Iranian-backed Houthis near the Yemeni border. This wasn't even big news. This is very big news, okay? Because what this potentially does is what they're trying to do. And understand that a lot of these groups, and okay, before I tell you that, get a load of this. How convenient is it that the Islamic resistance in Iraq, whenever they attack the United States, they come out and they create this nice little publication that says, here's what we did and why we did it. In the name of God, the merciful, I call on those who fight, who have been wronged, and The Mujahideen of the Islamic resistance in Iraq targeted the base of the American occupation at this specific location in western Iraq with this specific weapon delivery system and this specific ordnance, and we targeted directly the Islamic resistance in Iraq. They provide the date and they provide the name of the guy, the handle that looks like a work order here, number. This is ridiculous, man. Like, how convenient. Come on, man. We created the Al-Qaeda, we created the Hamas. All these groups are, come on. We all know what's going on here. Anyways, so with that in mind, understand that one of the biggest downsides with what is happening right now, there's been a battle because the Chinese were trying to broker a deal with the Saudis and the Iranians, and they were coming to terms. They had bridged that divide. The risk of war between Saudi Arabia and Iran was, for the most part, obviated by this agreement that had been made. So then you have the Saudis trying to make strides with the Israelis. You have the Americans working on that angle. At the same time, the Americans, of course, providing the Saudis with military equipment. The Saudis, arch nemesis of the Persians, historically. So there's this war for influence. Now you have this wedge being driven. These Houthis suddenly, throwing up, killing 4 Saudi troops. Were they in some way given an order from someone? I don't know. I'm just trying to think about this, because now the Saudis drive a wedge between the Israelis. They can't openly support the Israelis or MBS, Mohammed bin Salman or whatever his name is. He'll be beheaded by his own people who are Sunnis, Hamas, Sunnis. Okay, so they have to politically align themselves in the very least, or show some solidarity, show some level of condemnation, or else they'll see protests within their own country. Now, everybody's living pretty high on the hog there, so I don't know if they're going to be, well, I shouldn't say everybody, but, a good chunk of the population is living pretty good there. They're building cubes in pointless line cities that are going to have massive carbon footprints, but we're all going to pretend like they don't, and other ridiculous projects like that. So people are living pretty good, but there's a problem here now, right? So it's likely that we're going to see the U.S. try to start some shit between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and this could be the start of that. This could be a resurgence in the Yemeni war. We have Russian hackers gaining access to around 630,000 federal employee emails at the Department of Defense. The Russians, the Iranians, and the Chinese have so much cyber dirt on us right now. I'm almost confident that they could, at the stroke of a few buttons, completely crash our entire system. with the information that they have, if not with a direct hack that will target the critical infrastructure, just in indirect ways through espionage channels and just knowing about various programs, space programs, the Space Force and all that stuff. And Joel he goes into depth about like black budgets and why there probably is some level of space program that they're working on that they haven't officially revealed yet, which is why maybe, and he didn't say this, but I just thought about this, is probably why the Russians sent that signal out when they did in 2021, before the war started, when they shot down their own satellite, to the ire of the international community at the time, because they didn't forewarn anybody. What was that about? Okay, so we know there's this war going on, spy versus spy, James Bond stuff, while we sleep, that is happening 24/7, that we're just not privy to. We're not on that wavelength, okay? Putin was very mad in his presentation, his press conference that he gave today. And this is what he said, okay? And again, it's important to note that Chinese, two of the biggest companies who take their marching orders, absolutely, ask Jack Ma if you don't believe me, Alibaba and Baidu, they took Israel essentially off the map. They don't call it Israel anymore. So keep that in mind when I read you what Putin said today, okay? If you needed any more confirmation that we are on the precipice of World War III, look no further than this. And remember what happened in Dagestan yesterday. When you look at bloody children, dead children, how women, people old suffer, how doctors die and fists clench and tears well up in your eyes, you can't say it any other way, but we shouldn't. We don't have the right to allow ourselves to be guided by emotions. We must clearly understand who is really behind the tragedy of the people of the Middle East and other regions of the world. Who organizes deadly chaos? Who benefits from it? Today, this has become obvious and clear to everyone. The customers act openly and brazenly. It is the ruling elites of the United States and their satellites that are the main beneficiaries of global instability. He called them out right there. He basically said what we've kind of been tacitly referencing in this video today. It's also important to note that 2 months prior to the Israeli war, this is another interesting factoid. There was a lot of things running up to this whole Israeli war, like the exercises that were simulating strikes on Iranian military bases and their underground facilities, including their nuclear facilities. There was just a lot of oddities surrounding things that happened in the run-up to this. This was one of them. 2 months before Hamas attacked Israel, the Pentagon awarded a multi-million-dollar contract to build U.S. troop facilities for a secret base it maintains deep within Israel's Negev desert, just 20 miles from Gaza, codenamed Site 512. The long-standing U.S. base is a radar facility that monitors the skies for missile attacks on Israel. Now, why would you install something like this, you ask? Well, they must have did it for Gaza. Okay, well, let's see. On October 7th, however, when thousands of Hamas rockets were launched, Site 512 saw nothing. Because it was focused on Iran, 700 miles away. Now, why would it be focused on Iran? Why are they so concerned that Iran is going to start launching missiles at Israel? Well, if you don't know, Israel is like a Western foothold in the Middle East. It's a way, yeah, there's a whole, Zionism religious part to it, but by and large, it's a secular. The reason why money pours in there is because of its secular utility at ensuring that the United States has leverage in that region to guarantee that they can keep the price of gas low, all right? Because we need that oil. I know some people will say, oh, we produce the most oil and blah, blah, blah. No, we need that oil. We're the biggest consumers. Okay, so we absolutely needed the oil. We've always needed the oil, and we always will need the oil. So that's why. And we need that foothold there just to make sure that, people stay in line and that our tactical nuclear weapons they're not ours, but, they're Israel's. And in this manner, one could construe that in some ways, Israelis are potentially being thrown to the wolves. without knowing it in most cases. Some of them, I think, realize how they're somewhat puppets in this grand scheme of things. But because understand that if Israel uses a nuclear weapon, NATO doesn't have to get involved. Russia doesn't have to get involved. Israel can do it, and it's just a matter of what can Iran throw back at it. Now, would we utilize our nuclear weapons in response to Iran? I don't necessarily think that's guaranteed. In fact, I think if we were to do that, that's when Russia and China could start throwing nukes, and I don't know if we want that yet. But if you wanted a country that had an ambiguous nuclear strategy, like Israel, that was completely funded, beholden to the United States, and who could potentially police that region, make sure that, you know, all the countries acted accordingly. I'm not saying that Israel does that directly. It's really just their presence is more of a deterrence in this respect. And maybe there is some direct roles that Mossad plays in, you know, keeping the surrounding region in a certain state of instability so it doesn't develop. And remember that that's one of the key ways that any nation, a major superpower, retains its power is by ensuring that other nations that very well could be superpowers don't develop. And they try to sow seeds of chaos in those countries. They try to create division. They try to create infighting. And they try to get the countries warring with each other. This is something that has been instigated throughout the African continent for decades. And it's the same everywhere. The same strategy is employed everywhere. As long as they're fighting with each other, then we don't have to worry about them developing to the level where they can actually compete with us. The problem is you can only do that for so long before people start to catch on. But you can still have a lot of saboteurs at work. And because the United States is so resourceful, it's very likely that there's a lot of corrupt people who have sold out their countries in these respective countries, hence why you get things like color revolutions and these coups and things of that nature. But Joel Skousen, man, you know, that guy, like I say, I don't agree with everything he says. I think some of the things are, okay, it's a bit of a stretch. But one thing I will say is he is consistent. And he was predicting the Ukraine war over 10 years ago, and some people are making comments on that video saying, well, yeah, everybody after 2014 predicted it. Well, sure, but, and I won't say that everybody did, to be in fact, but he predicted it before the Maidan coup in 2014, okay? He said pretty much to the date, I think he said like if it wasn't 2021 or 2022, that's when Russia would go to Ukraine. Now, with somebody like that, typically when people are making predictions, they're very acute predictions. They're very near term because that's the kind of thing that gets clicks when you do near term predictions. Because, okay, well, you're saying that there's going to be a war with China in, 2035. Okay, I got time. So, to his benefit, and it's not like, he's a spring chicken, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way. I'm just saying, like, if he was really trying to sell people snake oil, he would have made the predictions within the parameter of his life, which was absolutely guaranteed. But he is saying now, his prediction, and you can go and watch the video, that in the next month, we're likely going to see things pop off in the Middle East. And come 2027, unless China seizes on the opportunity of the United States being sucked into a major war in the Middle East, before 2027, we see World War III with China. He's saying that China is the top dog in all of this. China is the end game, okay? And so for me, when a person makes a prediction like that, you got to listen to them. That doesn't mean you have to believe everything they say, but I would strongly encourage people to go and check it out. And man, oh man, take this opportunity, because I don't know if the markets are just stupid, if they know something we don't, if they think that the U.S. is going to bring some kind of stability with all of these warships. I just can't see it happening at this point. I mean, things are spiraling out of control so fast. The only thing that might prevent total chaos from ensuing is winter and it being too cold outside to protest. Had this shit happen in, spring fever, summer kicking off, I mean, all bets would be off. I think the cities would be burning down by now. But let's just see what happens. Stay prepped, stay ready, get yourself ready for the winter. Get yourself one of these. I'll post a link in the description. Help support the channel. We're going to be doing reviews on some more winter gear. We actually do reviews on this channel, believe it or not. This is a prepping channel. We have over 1,000 prepping specific videos, how to, going over various preparedness topics, what to expect in a grid down situation, every piece of gear that you can imagine. We only do innovative reviews as well. So we're never going to do like the latest flashlight or something like that. And I'm not throwing shade on people who do that, because those are very important reviews. But it's just not, it's something that I would rather watch the grass grow, to be brutally honest, unless it's a flashlight that I'm really, really interested in. While we're at it, let's just do a quick EDC recap, okay? So this is my favorite flashlight. This is the Streamlight Wedge. It is the best EDC flashlight in the world, bar none. Not just for me, for you too. For reasons, should I go into the reasons? Basically, it's got a flat form factor. It's got a deep pocket clip, lithium rechargeable, USB-C, ample amounts of brightness. It's 1,000 lumens. It's not this 120,000 lumen flashlight. This is 120,000 lumens. This is what you use to blind armies. Okay, you see that? It gets hot. Woo! You can actually burn yourself with that. Oh! Yeah, you can feel the heat. I can feel my face melt. Oh, yeah. You could burn bad guys with that. Anyways, I think that's Immolant, 120,000. This is 1,000, okay? But it's the perfect flashlight. Just trust me, it's lightweight, flat. It's got one simple switch. You don't want to be thumbing through buttons and unlocking and holding it down and none of that bullshit. One toggle switch, and when you put it in your pants, the toggle switch is such that when you push it in, there is no risk of it turning on in your pocket. The only risk of it turning on is when you pull it out, which is fine because you're going to use it. In terms of the knife that I'm carrying right now, hope I can remember the name of it, but I love this knife, man. This is the Benchmade. What is this one? This is the, what the hell is it? Oh, it's just a beautiful knife. I typically carry a lot of knives on me. This is the Benchmade Bug Out in the aluminum handle. But this one, it's either the Griptilian or what the hell is it? But it's just, it's got a nice weight. It's not too heavy. See it there? Can we get some focus here? There we go. Look at that. Look at that beauty. Look at that beauty. I'm telling you, man, this is one of the best knives I've ever owned. And it's got the deep pocket clary clip, very beefy, very sharp, and just a beautiful knife. I like the Benchmade Bug Outs as well because they happen to be, let me see if I can get that focus for you here. They happen to be very ultra light, but also very durable. I've owned about 3 or 4, never broken one. A lot of people say, oh, it's a wimpy looking knife. I ain't overcompensating for anything. It's okay if the knife is small. If it gets the job done, it's good enough for me. And this is my Flash MT multi-tool. Thing I like about this is that it's lightweight. It is one-handed operation. And yeah, it just comes with all the basics. It's got the deep carry. I'm all about the deep carry clip. All I really need a multi-tool for, to be honest, is the pliers and a screwdriver. I have a few gripes with this that I'm not going to go into, but it's also good to have a backup knife as well. This one has a locking and assisted open feature, which I apparently haven't used in a while. There we go. Anyways, what else do we got for EDC? I think that's it for the most part. A couple other things I probably can't show you, but anyways, guys, if you want to support the channel, that's the way to do it. Now is the time to be doing the gear up because they're not sending all of these warships there for no reason. They're about to do something really, really stupid because I do believe this is the last Hail Mary pass of the American economy. And if they can't lock it in this time, then it's time for the crash. Okay, the crash could come early this Christmas. So get ready, gear up, and yeah, to stay safe. And we will be back tomorrow to let you know what's going on. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out.